So Jaehin is coming out on this patch. I'm not gonna go over him for the patch notes. If you want to figure out about Jaehin, look him up for yourself. Let me see if I can fix this really quick. There we go. Looks a little better. All right. So first change to note is Shen is getting like pseudo rework. His Q is gonna be really different. His W is gonna be like area of effect dodge. So he might be a little bit more viable as support. I know people like to play him as support before anyway. And probably his top lane will still be really good. I'm not actually sure about how he's going to be built or like anything of that nature, whether he still has health scaling, but maybe after I get a couple of games on him, then I can give a better idea of how Shen's going to play out. I expect his identity to be mostly the same. Maybe he'll have like some crazy offensive build that he can do though. So that wouldn't be out of the ordinary. So this Mundo change here, Mundo's basically like getting gutted in the early game. This actually looks too big still. Let me. Okay, yeah, I can get everything in that shot. So they say what happens when a late game monster also gets to dominate early. So yeah, they want him to basically be paying some sort of price for having such good late game strength. They want to make it so he's not an early game pick for how much late game strength he has. The cooldown on his ult is gonna hurt the most. This is something that they've uh, used as a lever for balance in the past, and pretty much every time they increase his ultimate cooldown, he goes into being unpicked again. And this nerf on top of that is just gonna be it's gonna be really tough to make Jungle Mundo work anymore. So this won't affect top lane Mundo nearly as much since you'll be able to get that Spirit Visage a little bit easier and not have to worry about the cooldown. And then your E was kind of like, a little bit extra damage anyway. It was pretty absurd the way they reworked it. So since it's an auto attack reset still, this really doesn't change much for top lane Mundo. And I just see him not being permaban all the time, but still being viable for competitive. So Elise changes. She was performing a little bit too well with Runic Echoes. I pretty much saw this coming. Volatile Spiderling got a damage reduction of 15 at max rank, 15 at first rank, so it's just all across the board 15 damage nerf. Not really a big deal. But the important thing is she lost 5 movement speed in human and spider form, so that just kind of brings her in line with other champions. She was a little bit faster than everyone else, it seems like, for seemingly no reason. And she'll still be able to chase you down. It's actually like a really big deal. 5 movement speed. Like if they took 5 more movement speed from her, she might be unplayable. Something like that. But uh, in this current metagame with all these movement speed items, you could probably make anything work. Swifty boots are so prevalent as well, so that's not going to be too big of a deal at the end of the day. That's a nice way to bring her power down without hitting the rest of her numbers, which anytime you're going to nerf a champion that has essentially no ultimate, kind of like 2 sets of abilities though, you don't want to take away too much damage because then at that point you shouldn't have had a champion with no ultimate. It just goes against the design goals. At that point you wouldn't want to transform champion. You'd need some kind of damage ultimate to make up for such low damage on the rest of the kit. Um, Fiora Vitals will not spawn a little bit more predictably. It specifically says alternates between top right and bottom left sides. So previously was random, and I've had some fun kind of like manipulating what direction I'm facing when Fjord is trying to proc vitals. If you have really good mechanics, then it's a lot more rewarding to do so. I think this is going to actually remove a lot of that. It's going to make it a little bit easier for her to proc. And this probably is the quality of life change that's going to put her into permaban territory. I think she'll be banned quite a bit on this patch. And this Gangplank nerf is really warranted. His ultimate was just kind of like too strong on too low of a cooldown. So instead of hitting the strength, they're hitting the cooldown, which I agree with. For a global ability that's that powerful, it was like literally a minute and a half cooldown as soon as GP had like 20 or 30% cooldown reduction. Now it's going to be, right around 2 minutes. So still pretty good, but he's going to pay for it early game with a really long cooldown, and then once he has a couple of cooldown items, it'll be right about the same cooldown as it is right now, just maybe like plus 10 or 20 seconds. Karma. W costs less mana at all ranks. This is actually not going to help support Karma like they think it is. This is only going to help lane Karma, and I actually had mid lane Karma on my team last game, right before the server shut down. Then I decided to record this video. Yeah, she carried really hard. She built. I didn't actually see her build order, but she had Frost Queens and Luden's Echo, and she was just doing hella damage. So lowering the mana costs on W is just gonna be like a lot more utility for an already overloaded utility champion. So I think this might actually put her into the pool of mid lane champions, especially in competitive. Maybe not so much for most solo queue players, but she can actually deal with Victor fairly well, and he's pretty strong in the current metagame. Kha'Zix, we're finding a happy medium here for Kha'Zix and their ability to front load damage. Basically the main points about Kha'Zix here, I have them written down actually. Let me look through this. Okay, yeah, I have new changes written down and Kha'Zix changes. So what I figured out is if you're going for a kill on a guaranteed target, this is in order to utilize this new mechanic. What it does basically is you're going to be able to cast your ultimate or your W slightly before landing from your jump, your E ability. So when you jump, the specific wording on it is if Kha'Zix attempts to cast both Void Spikes and Void Assault while midair, he'll buffer only the last one he attempted to cast, not both, because that would be too much. So basically, like if you're spamming all your abilities, you hit E and then R or W, it means it'll just cast your W right when you land, something like that. But yeah, the main choice that you're going to make now is, am I hitting a guaranteed target, or am I trying to catch up to someone or possibly evade capture? So if you were to cast your E onto a guaranteed target, you can cast your W slightly before landing. This would actually be a DPS increase because of the utility of not having to cast your W on your ground combo. But it will also be off cooldown sooner since you cast it from the air. I was thinking that W will probably warrant a late point to upgrade, and you might skip your Q or maybe your E, I'm not sure. The reset mechanic has always been pretty important to Kha'Zix, depending on how you play him. You probably still gonna want to upgrade your ultimate first on Kha'Zix, so I think what you would do is upgrade ultimate now, and then maybe your E or W, and then whichever one you didn't level. That's just personally how I see it. Like, you're not going to get a bunch of isolations off in the current meta, uh, unless you're like committed to heavy split push Kha'Zix with like Ghostblade or something, which that's totally viable. You can play however you want in solo queue. Um, in terms of competitive, this isn't going to change a whole lot. He'll just be played sort of off tank already, so you may see a little bit of solo queue. Kha'Zix is trying out some different build orders and figuring out what's going to be the best. Specifically, there's another item coming out that's supposed to help Kha'Zix quite a bit. I can't remember the name of it, but what it does is after you auto attack, like after 2 seconds, on enemy champion, it'll deal like 25% of their missing health, and it's got like an insanely long 2 minute cooldown or something like that. But it's not even like an active ability; it's just on your auto attack when it's up. So that item could get changed in the future. So we'll see what actually makes to live before I start to comment on possible interactions with Kha'Zix or other champions. I know Zed was uh, said to be a champion that might actually be pretty good with that item. And Kindred, Q mana cost up, E base damage is down. So they're just like, this is basically like a slap on the wrist. That's how I see this nerf. Goes from 80, 110, 140, 170, 200. Yeah, it's only 20 damage nerf per rank, but it still has the scaling and percent health damage. I don't think this nerf is going to do anything to Kindred. They're mainly picked for ultimate and ability to scale and snowball a game, so all that stuff's still going to be there. There's not very many situations where 35 mana is going to empty Kindred's mana pool where 30 mana wouldn't. So like every 6 casts, that's only another 30 mana. So basically every six casts of Q, it'll cost you 7 casts worth if you think about it in terms of the old mana costs. So not a big deal really. And then 20 damage, take it or leave it. That's basically the same thing they did to Elise. I'm actually okay with it because once you have a certain amount of damage in the game, it's really hard to uh, like go away from your current numbers. Like Riot's already balancing like on a knife's edge right now, so changing numbers up too much just means that they have to drastically change their kits as well if they want to change numbers around. So they seem a lot more aware of that nowadays, and see a little bit of that here with this new rework, mini rework. They're calling this like pretty much just a balance change, but this is, I mean, I know his W, his Q, and his R are not being touched, but this is a complete rework for this ability. This isn't just a small balance change. I actually have a new video, like a specialized new masteries video. You should go check that out. It's pretty dope. But new top's gonna be good on this patch. New jungle will be a little bit less good. And if you want to know why, watch the video. Poppy, small bug fixes to clear up Poppy's interaction with her passive, as well as a quality life tweak for Q. If the target dies before the shield reaches it, the shield will not return. The shield will now return to Poppy when it kills a champion with a zombie passive. Okay, so just like some quality of life changes, that's nice. And this change is a follow-up to the change where they made her EQ combo sort of auto target after you hit your E and Q in quick succession. So they just kind of like, let's say it was tuned to like 100%, they just kind of like tuned it down to like 50%. So your cursor won't go as crazy automatic cast on where they think it should be cast, and it'll be a little bit more in your own control now. I'm not really sure why they made that change in the first place, because um, the EQ is already pretty reliable. Only old Poppy was more reliable than this current iteration, obviously, but the current EQ is still pretty good. I don't think they should have left it mostly a skill shot and not some kind of champion that everyone will be able to play now. Her numbers and her kit in general are just too good, so where if you keep giving her quality of life fixes, then she becomes uh, like a permanent pick, staple pick. Rengar, I'm not actually sure what all these changes are going to mean. We'll have to see how it looks in game. The implication for these changes look like a nerf, but there's certain things that they change about Rengar every time that makes me wonder if they actually want to nerf him or if they want to try and make it so that he's not bullshit to play against but still rewarding to play, which I know that is their goal, but I honestly think they should just nerf him down a little bit harder than this. We'll have to see how he plays on live though. Passive stack duration down. That's going to be the biggest change here for Tahm Kench. That doesn't matter really. Tongue hitbox indicator now lasts longer. The major change as well, other than the passive change, is the 2 to 4 and 6% bonus health. His abilities aren't going to deal like quite as much damage now. If you read the wiki for the way his abilities interact, basically his ultimate, like level 1 through 5, he's not going to get that extra damage on his abilities, but once he puts a point into his ultimate, since he has kind of a utility ultimate, what they did is they slapped on some extra damage and scaling damage, like you see here, onto his other abilities. His Devour still got a huge nuke, and he'll still have percent damage to deal with tanks. Obviously it's good against carries as well, but he's not going to be quite as OP. We'll have to see if this really affects his support or if it just makes him more of a like full-on top laner. I actually don't think this nerf's gonna hurt his top lane at all. I think this is gonna hurt support Kench more than anything. But I think for competitive play, he's still pretty much the same champion. You can just lane swap now that you have Kench nerfed down a little bit more. He's not got nearly as many winning matchups after these changes, so support Kench maybe for lane swapping and competitive. Support Kench and solo queue not quite as good. Top lane Kench pretty much unchanged. So this is the Frost Queen's claim nerf. This is the most important nerf in the game right now, as far as I'm concerned. Ghosts no longer move slightly faster when they can see their target. That's good, because that was bullshit. That shouldn't have been in the game in the first place. And the active cooldown has gone from 60 seconds to 90 seconds. So that's actually pretty massive, because you would see people just spamming Frost Queens just to like make plays non-stop. And this is gonna make it so they're gonna have to be a little bit more calculated with that. Um, they didn't hit the gold generation aspect. They didn't hit the cooldown or the ability power. But what they did do is they made the alternatives a little bit better in cost. So I think I probably would switch to Morelos over Frost Queens on most of the champions that would want this item before. And Athenes was just taking a backseat to Rod of Ages, really. There's pretty much no reason to get this item when these two items exist. Or not Morelos. When Frost Queens and Rod of Ages exist, there's like no reason to get either of those. The Dark Seal, 350 gold now instead of 400. That's fine. I really don't like the fact that this item stacks up from the early game. It makes it pretty much feast or famine with the old Magi's. You didn't have to worry about if you were going to die in lane with an Amp Tome because your Amp Tome didn't carry stacks over, right? So you could die or trade 1 for 1 and go back and get your Magi's and then start stacking up from there. If you try to do that with the Dark Seal, you're just going to lose stacks right off the bat. So Dark Seal is probably still not a great starting item despite being lowered in cost. It'll just be a little bit easier for you to pick up when you're comfortable with probably not dying. So I really don't see the point in building this item first, even though they lowered the cost. They might as well have just stuck with Magi's being only purchasable by itself. No, either keep it in an Amp Tome or just make it so it doesn't have a component. So that's my opinion for stacking bullshit. Cole has more base AD, more gold when hitting 100 CS, so this coming out with 5 damage and no bonus health and no lifesteal, this item just fucking blows still. This isn't going to do anything to make this item any better. If you start Cole against someone who has Doran's Blade, they're just going to mop the floor with you, and then if you spend money on Cole after your first back, then you're just basically like buying a longsword that's not even a full longsword. And then you're like hoping that it'll give you another longsword after farming 100 creeps. That's terrible. The whole idea of this item is so shitty. It's gonna have to be overbuffed to the point where everyone's building it before it's even good, so they might as well just remove it. Rapid fire cannon, small bug fix. Fixed the bug where champions would run into normal attack range even when they had an empowered attack range from rapid fire cannon. Not really a major change. Wall collision detection, I'll skip that. Assassin is going to be a little bit better. This does not work on jungle creeps anymore, so I will probably update some mastery videos to reflect this change, but the overwhelming majority of my mastery decisions are pretty much the same. So all the ones that I change will be noted, of course. And fuck me. Okay, I muted the mic for that second cough. That was brutal. Alright. So, Thunderlord's Decree, cooldown up at lower levels and down at later levels. They're basically giving this the Warlord's Bloodlust and Fervor of Battle treatment. Where they made it kind of scale with your level. So, now instead of being 20-second cooldown, it's going to be 25 to 15 seconds. Obviously, at level 18, it'll be 15-second cooldown. So, apparently they're saying Thunderlords is still crowding out other choices. I don't necessarily think that that's true. I think that in the current meta, there's just a lot of champions that benefit from Thunderlords. I don't think that it's because of Thunderlords that these champions are being played. I think that it's a result of a lot of things that are in the current meta just make the Cunning Tree really strong as well. There's a lot of hidden damage in that tree to the point where I would almost call it offense tree, and utility. I want to say the resolve tree is basically like the old defense and utilities trees put together. That would be a good way to explain it. But yeah, the most important change for Thunderlords is the stack decay period has gone from 5 seconds to 3 seconds. So like, let's say you tag someone with an ability in lane, you're only gonna have 3 seconds to follow up and auto attack and maybe hit them with another ability or auto attack again before your first stack will disappear. So like, this basically is going to have a lot of effect on Thunderlord's champions in lane. You won't be able to get off as many procs, or if you do, you're going to have to commit significantly harder in order to get it. This isn't going to change anything for junglers that would use Thunderlords. You're still going to probably take Thunderlords on all those champions. This might change certain laners that would want to go Thunderlords before. I know Deathfire Touch is becoming a little bit more attractive with some of these item changes coming up too. So in general, I think that they over nerfed Thunderlords a little bit here, but it's not really drastically different. They didn't nerf the damage, they didn't nerf any of the scaling. They just made it to where it's not quite as good as it is right now. I know right when it came out, it was bugged where it would only work on one person per team, and it was on 30-second cooldown. So for the longest time, Thunderlords was just no good, and then it was too good for too long. So I think they're just a little bit tired of it and probably intentionally over nerfing it a little bit just so we can get a little bit of diversity back. But since there's no better masteries, like I went through this example earlier, but like with their current balanced level, right? They're basically using Thunderlords as the keystone to balance all other keystones off of. And even though they're like retroactively taking the scaling thing from Warlords and Fervor of Battle and repurposing it for Thunderlords, that doesn't mean that they didn't always plan to do that for Thunderlords. So if you really wanted to, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you can't buff the rest of the other masteries. They are what they are. So they finally have gotten to the point where they're at strategic diversity. It's not because there's a lot of good picks. It's because it's almost like every champion is forced into a certain playstyle, even though they wanted it to be diverse. Kind of like Yasuo and Tryndamere. I mean, yeah, they could go Fervor of Battle, but that's going to be terrible on them. Like, they're obviously going to go Warlord's Bloodlust, like, every single game. So, outside of your niche applications for Storm Raider, Surge, and what are the other masteries? Oh yeah, I think that Grasp of the Undying is a good mastery too, and maybe Bond of Stone. But like Strength of the Ages, I think that's kind of a gimmicky mastery. I think it was dumb that they put it in the game. Windspeaker's Blessing is pretty good mastery too, but in terms of the offensive capabilities of the keystones that they promised us, I'm a little bit disappointed that now we're left with basically Thunderlords uh, and Fervor of Battle. Everything else, nothing else does damage basically. And Grasp of the Undying is really only for tanks, so much for diversity again. Another great season. But no, I'm not trying to be down. I actually like the changes. I just wish that it was a little bit different. For Fervor of Battle, I think they over nerfed that mastery, so it's not nearly as fun to use. And I don't know. maybe my opinion will change, but I just feel underwhelmed with all of these changes. These ward changes, so the way I see this is they're basically it's almost like they didn't put any ward change in at all until this patch. So this is going to be the first real patch that we'll get to see if this really does anything, because I can guarantee you nobody was using the information of the current ward debris drops. It's just pitiful, like how little information you can get from it. And it's like, yeah, they're warding that brush. It's like, no shit. But now you're going to be able to tell right when it was first placed, because it'll glow very brightly in the first 10% of its lifespan. It will stop emitting flames after 30% of its lifespan has passed. And apparently the particle visibly changes and debris shrinks after 60% of its lifespan has passed. So there you have it. Amazing. Scan detection from center to center to center to edge. Find hidden Cho'Gaths easier. This will have very little impact when it comes to sweeping wards, but it should be more fun to tag fatty champions hiding in the brush. Another amazing change. Blue wards now have their own unique mini-map icon. They're just giving this the real ward treatment. They just kind of threw it in the game and it didn't function like regular wards. Now it does. Trinkets castable during channels except Jaehin and Xerath. It's like, sorry guys, we like fixed the code for everyone else, but because these champions' abilities are coded so weird, we couldn't fix that yet. Skipping this. I don't believe any of that, but all the matchmaking improvement stuff, I don't believe any of that is true. Anyway, bug fixes. My favorite. HUD font size now properly scales with HUD settings rather than system DPI settings. Sorry 4K users. I don't have 4K, but thanks anyway. Fixed a bug where sweeping lenses animation would play when walking into brush the enemy team swept earlier in the match. That was an annoying bug. Fixed a bug where Warlord's Bloodless attack speed buff was lasting 1 second less than intended. So this could actually have been souring my view of Warlord's Bloodlust without me knowing it. Like, anytime you have like I'm saying like a lot. Anytime you have a buff that is bugged, you can't really get a good feel on it. And so I'll reserve my judgment for Warlord's Bloodlust users. Anyone that pretty much built Infinity Edge first is going to want this mastery anyway. And maybe some Essence Reaver users as well. I think Jaehin is probably not going to like that mastery as much. But we'll see. We will see. I heard he was actually bad, but I don't know. Fixed a bug where Hecarim's E, Devastating Charge, and Onslaught of Shadows combo wasn't working properly. Yeah, so hopefully they fix that so Hecarim players can be happy and play the horse. Similar to Rise, Cassiopeia now retains her previous movement or attack command after Twin Fang's cast finishes. She's due for like a complete rework here soon anyway, so I don't know why they're bothering with that. Vel'Koz's Disintegration Ray no longer does a variety of strange things if cast, as Vel'Koz last hits a target. So there was the Fiddle instant cast ultimate, so I guess there was some kind of interaction with Vel'Koz's ultimate too. And Malphite's ultimate was sometimes knocking up people and damaging units at the start position instead of the end position when interacting with displacements, so that should be nice. Of course, you don't actually know if Riot changed any of this stuff, so It's all just hearsay until we actually see the things in game. Fixed the bug where the displacement effects would not displace Zack during Elastic Slingshot's travel time. They like to sneak a lot of changes into the game. Whether or not that was an intended way for his E to interact before, like they'll just completely 180 on it and just call it a bug now. It's like so much easier damage control for them. So you gotta watch. You gotta really watch what they're doing behind the scenes. They're super notorious for doing that. Fixed a bug where leveling up caused Graves' E quick draws armor and magic resistance bonus to become inconsistent until refreshed. That doesn't surprise me one bit. Malzahar's Q will now give proper vision. Yasuo's Windwall now properly continues to block projectiles if Yasuo dies. Fixed a bug where Yasuo's third Q, Steel Tempest, and his EQ combo could deal damage through spell shields in certain situations. I've seen that bug. Fixed a bug where Leona's Zenith Blade is still rooted to target mid-dash even if they spell shielded the ability. Really only affects Sivir and maybe Morgana. I've seen that like a few times. I don't know how consistent it was, but you never know if they actually fixed this stuff or not because they don't, not all of these bugs have a 100% replication rate, so unless you have a bug with 100% replication rate, you can't necessarily know for sure that you fixed it. You may have just made the bug appear in a different way. And as you can tell from the early days with Riot, they sometimes would introduce massive bugs and have to revert patches, so they've come a long way. Pantheon's passive Aegis Protection now blocks and gets consumed by attacks by Annie's Timber and Heimerdinger's ultimate turret. Fixed many cases of on-hit effects applying even when blocked by Pantheon's passive Aegis Protection. Fixed a bug that caused Cyrus plant attacks to ignore a target's dodge status. So really only Jax and Shen's AoE now. I guarantee they fixed that because Shen. If it was just a Jax only bug, they probably wouldn't have even fixed it. Rift Herald now drops a soul for Thresh. And that's it. So if you have any requests for any content you'd like to see that I'm not covering, shoot me a message, shoot me a comment, however you want to get a hold of me, and I will get back to you.